A Commonwealth citizen is a citizen of a Commonwealth of Nations member state. Most member countries generally do not treat citizens of other Commonwealth states any differently from foreign nationals, but do grant limited citizenship rights to resident Commonwealth citizens. For example, in 14 member states, resident non-local Commonwealth citizens are eligible to vote in elections. The status is most significant in the United Kingdom, and carries few or no privileges in many other Commonwealth countries. Commonwealth citizenship was created out of a gradual transition from an earlier form of British nationality as the British Empire began dissolving. Before 1949, all citizens of the Empire were British subjects and owed allegiance to the Crown. Although the Dominions, Australia, Canada, Ireland, Newfoundland, New Zealand, and South Africa, created their own nationality laws following the First World War, they mutually maintained British subjecthood as a common nationality with the United Kingdom and its colonies. However, divergence in Dominion legislation and growing assertions of independence from London culminated in the creation of Canadian citizenship in 1946 and its separation from British subject status. Combined with the impending independence of India and Pakistan in 1947, nationality law reform became necessary. The British Nationality Act 1948 redefined British subject as any citizen of the United Kingdom, its colonies, or other Commonwealth countries. Commonwealth citizen was also defined in this act as having the same meaning. This change in naming indicated a shift in the base theory of British nationality, that allegiance to the Crown was no longer a requirement to hold British subject status. The change was also necessary to retain a number of newly independent countries that wished to become republics rather than retain the monarch as head of state. The common status of Commonwealth citizenship would instead be maintained voluntarily by the various members of the Commonwealth. At first, all Commonwealth citizens held the automatic right to settle in the United Kingdom. This was first restricted by Parliament with the Commonwealth Immigrants Act 1962, which imposed immigration controls on subjects originating from outside the main British islands. The Immigration Act 1971 relaxed controls on patrials, those whose parents or grandparents were born in the United Kingdom, and effectively gave preferential treatment to Commonwealth citizens from white-majority countries. Outside the United Kingdom, in some member states Commonwealth citizens also initially retained eligibility to vote in elections, to preferred paths to citizenship, and to welfare benefits. These privileges were removed on independence in most countries but retained in some. British subjects/Commonwealth citizens were eligible to vote in New Zealand until 1975, Canada at the federal level until 1975, not fully phased out in provinces until 2006, and Australia until 1984, though subjects on the electoral roll in that year are still eligible. By the 1980s, most colonies of the British Empire had become independent. Parliament updated nationality law to reflect the more modest geographical boundaries of the United Kingdom and its remaining territories. The British Nationality Act 1981 redefined British subject in such a way that it no longer also meant Commonwealth citizen. Commonwealth citizenship is acquired by virtue of being a citizen of a Commonwealth member state or, in the United Kingdom, a country listed in Schedule 3 of the British Nationality Act 1981. This list closely follows the composition of the organisation, but is not always the same. For example, the Maldives left the Commonwealth in 2016 before rejoining in 2020. The country was removed from Schedule 3 in 2017, but legislation was not updated to relist it until 2021. Conversely, although Zimbabwe has not been a part of the Commonwealth since 2003, Zimbabwean citizens retain Commonwealth citizenship because the country remains on Schedule 3. Most classes of British nationals other than British citizens are also considered Commonwealth citizens. British Overseas Territories citizens, British overseas citizens, British subjects, and British nationals, overseas, all have this additional status. However, British protected persons 16 and non-citizen nationals of other Commonwealth countries, such as overseas citizens of India, are not considered Commonwealth citizens. Acquisition and loss of Commonwealth citizenship is tied to the domestic nationality regulations of each member state. There is no separate process for obtaining this status. It is automatically lost if an individual is no longer a citizen or qualified national of a member state, or if their country is removed from Schedule 3. Commonwealth citizens have different entitlements in each Commonwealth country, which individually have separate legislation specifying what, if any, rights they are afforded. The organization does not have a permissive system of free movement or labor, and in over half of the member states, Commonwealth citizens do not receive substantially different treatment than foreign nationals. In 14 countries and all 3 Crown dependencies of the United Kingdom, Commonwealth citizens may register to vote after fulfilling residence requirements. In Australia, Bermuda, and the Cayman Islands, they no longer have the right to register as electors, but voters who were already registered before that right was ended may continue to participate in elections. Commonwealth citizens are also eligible to serve in one or both houses of the national legislature in Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the United Kingdom. All Commonwealth citizens may receive consular assistance from British embassies and consulates in foreign non-Commonwealth nations during emergencies where their home countries have not established diplomatic or consular posts. They are eligible to apply for British emergency passports, if their travel documents have been lost or stolen and permission has been given by their national governments. Additionally, Australia issues documents of identity in exceptional circumstances to resident Commonwealth citizens who are unable to obtain valid travel documents from their countries of origin and must travel urgently. When residing in the United Kingdom, Commonwealth citizens are eligible to be employed in non-reserved civil service posts and are eligible to enlist in the British Armed Forces. In addition, Commonwealth citizens were generally exempt from the requirement to register with local police. However, this is no longer required in general, as the police registration scheme was nevertheless abolished in August 2022. In the Commonwealth of Nations, a High Commissioner is the senior diplomat, generally ranking as an ambassador, in charge of the diplomatic mission of one Commonwealth government to another. Instead of an embassy, the diplomatic mission is generally called a High Commission. In the British Empire, most of the territories of which became the Commonwealth, High Commissioners were envoys of the imperial government appointed to manage protectorates or groups of territories not fully under the sovereignty of the British Crown, while Crown colonies, British sovereign territories, were normally administered by a governor, and the most significant possessions, large confederations, and the self-governing dominions were headed by a Governor-General. For example, when Cyprus came under British administration in 1878, it remained nominally under the suzerainty of the Ottoman Empire. The representative of the British government and head of the administration was titled High Commissioner until Cyprus became a Crown colony in 1925, when the incumbent High Commissioner became the first governor. Another example were the High Commissioners for Palestine. A High Commissioner could also be charged with the last phase of decolonization, as in the Crown colony of the Seychelles, where the last governor became High Commissioner in 1975, when self-rule under the Crown was granted, until 1976, when the archipelago became an independent republic within the Commonwealth. As diplomatic residents, as diplomatic ranks were codified, this became a lower class than ambassadors, and High Commissioners were sometimes appointed to native rulers. High Commissioners could likewise be appointed as British agents of indirect rule over native states. Thus High Commissioners could be charged with managing diplomatic relations with native rulers and their states, analogous to the resident minister, and might have under them several resident commissioners or similar agents attached to each state. In regions of particular importance, a Commissioner General was appointed to have control over several High Commissioners and governors, e.g. the Commissioner General for Southeast Asia had responsibility for Malaya, Singapore, and British Borneo. The first High Commissioner of India to London was appointed in 1920. He had no political role, but mostly dealt with the business interests of the Indian Federation. The first agent of the Indian government was appointed to South Africa in 1927. Although not a dominion, the self-governing colony of Southern Rhodesia was represented in the United Kingdom by a High Commission in London, while the United Kingdom similarly had a High Commission in Salisbury. Following the unilateral declaration of independence by the government of Ian Smith in 1965, the Rhodesian High Commissioner, Andrew Skene, was expelled from London, while his British counterpart, Sir John Johnston, was withdrawn by the British government. The role of High Commissioner for Southern Africa was coupled with that of British Governor of the Cape Colony in the 19th century, giving the colonial administrator in question responsibility both for administering British possessions and relating to neighbouring Boer settlements. Historically, the protectorates of Bechuanaland, now Botswana, Basutoland, now Lesotho, and Swaziland, now Eswatini, were administered as High Commission territories by the Governor-General of the Union of South Africa, who was also the British High Commissioner for Bechuanaland, Basutoland, and Swaziland until the 1930s, with various local representatives, then by the British High Commissioner, from 1961 Ambassador, to South Africa, who was represented locally in each by a resident Commissioner. The British Governor of the Crown Colony of the Straits Settlements, based in Singapore, doubled as High Commissioner of the Federated Malay States, and had authority over the Resident General in Kuala Lumpur, who in turn was responsible for the various residents appointed to the native rulers of the Malay States under British protection. The British Western Pacific Territories were permanently governed as a group of minor insular colonial territories, under one single, not even full-time, Western Pacific High Commissioner, 1905-53, an office attached first to the governorship of Fiji, and subsequently to that of the Solomon Islands, represented in each of the other islands' units, by a resident commissioner, consul or other official, on tiny Pitcairn Islands a mere chief magistrate. The British High Commissioner to New Zealand is also ex officio the Governor of the Pitcairn Islands. The first Dominion High Commissioner was appointed by Canada as its envoy in London. Previously, Sir John Rose, 1st Baronet, a Canadian businessman resident in London and former Canadian Finance Minister, had acted as the personal representative of the Canadian Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, from 1869 to 1874, and then was given the title of Financial Commissioner from 1874 until 1880. Alexander Mackenzie, while he was Prime Minister, appointed Edward Jenkins, a British Member of Parliament with links to Canada, to act as the government's representative in London as Agent General, 1874 to 1876, followed by former Nova Scotia Premier William Annand, 1876 to 1878. When Macdonald returned to power in 1878, he requested to elevate the position of Financial Commissioner to Resident Minister, but was denied the request by the British government, who instead offered to allow the designation of High Commissioner. The Canadian government appointed Alexander Tilloch Galt as the first High Commissioner of Canada to the United Kingdom in 1880. New Zealand appointed a High Commissioner in 1905, in place of a resident Agent General who had been appointed since 1871. Australia did the same in 1910, and South Africa in 1911. The British government continued not to appoint High Commissioners to the Dominions, holding that the British government was already represented by the relevant Governor-General or Governor. This arrangement began to create problems after the First World War, with Dominions expecting a greater degree of control over their external and foreign affairs and beginning to challenge the constitutional role of their Governors-General. In Canada, matters came to a head during the King-Byng affair of 1926, when the Governor-General refused the advice of the Canadian Prime Minister to dissolve Parliament and call elections, as would normally apply under the Westminster system. The incident led to the Balfour Declaration made at the Imperial Conference of 1926 that established that Governors-General in the independent dominions were not the representatives of the United Kingdom government but the personal representatives of the monarch. In 1930, Australia broke another tradition by insisting that the monarch act on the advice of the Australian Prime Minister in the appointment of the Governor-General, and insisted on the appointment of Sir Isaac Isaacs, the first Australian-born person to serve in the office. The practice became the norm throughout the Commonwealth. The first British High Commissioner to a Dominion was appointed in 1928 to Canada. South Africa received a British High Commissioner in 1930, Australia in 1936, and New Zealand in 1939. The first high-ranking official envoy from one dominion to another was appointed by South Africa to Canada in 1938. Yet, because of various procedural complications, only in 1945 was South African envoy to Canada designated officially as High Commissioner. New Zealand appointed a High Commissioner to Canada in 1942, and a High Commissioner to Australia in 1943. In 1973, the then Australian Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, proposed that the title be replaced with that of Ambassador, but other Commonwealth members in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean indicated a preference for keeping the separate title and status of High Commissioner, and the matter was not pursued further. The term is used across all 56 member states of the Commonwealth of Nations, as diplomatic relations between these countries are traditionally at a governmental level rather than at the head of state level, as is otherwise common. This is because traditionally these Commonwealth states shared a head of state, the monarch of the United Kingdom, currently Charles III. In diplomatic usage, a High Commissioner is considered equivalent in rank and role to an ambassador, and carries the full title of High Commissioner Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. A High Commissioner from one Commonwealth state to another carries a simple and often informal letter of introduction from one head of government, Prime Minister, to that of another, host country, while ambassadors carry formal letters of credence from their head of state addressed to the host country's head of state. The difference in accreditation is also reflected in the formal titles of envoys to Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth states. Example: British High Commissioners to the Commonwealth countries are formally titled the High Commissioner for His Majesty's Government in the United Kingdom, whereas British ambassadors to non-Commonwealth countries are known as His Britannic Majesty's Ambassador. For historical reasons, High Commissioners are also appointed even in the case of republics in the Commonwealth and indigenous monarchies, e.g. the kingdoms of Tonga, Eswatini, etc., who have monarchs other than the reigning British monarch, within the Commonwealth. In this case, letters of commission are usually issued by one head of state and presented to the other. However, some Commonwealth governments may choose to use the more informal method of issuing prime ministerial letters of introduction, while other governments have opted instead for letters of credence. Instead of embassies, the diplomatic missions of Commonwealth countries are called High Commissions, although it is possible for a country to appoint a High Commissioner without having a permanent mission in the other country, e.g. the British High Commissioner in Suva, Fiji, is also accredited as High Commissioner to Kiribati, Tuvalu, and Tonga. Zimbabwe, as a Commonwealth country, traditionally had High Commissioners in other Commonwealth countries. When it withdrew from the Commonwealth, it changed the style of its High Commissions to embassies. Outside the capital, practice is less standard. Subordinate commissioners or deputy high commissioners may be appointed instead of consuls, and the commissioner's mission may be known as a consulate, commission, or deputy high commission. Historically, in British colonies, independent Commonwealth countries were represented by commissions. For example, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand maintained commissions in Singapore, while following its independence in 1947, India established commissions in Kenya, Trinidad and Tobago, and Mauritius, which became high commissions on independence. Similarly, when Hong Kong was under British administration, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, Malaysia, and Singapore were represented by commissions, but following the transfer of sovereignty to China in 1997, these were replaced by consulates general, as in other non-capital cities in non-Commonwealth countries, with the last commissioner becoming the first consul general. Canada formerly had a commissioner to Bermuda, although this post was held by the consul general to New York City, but there is now an honorary Canadian consulate on the island. Despite the differences in terminology, Commonwealth High Commissioners have, since 1948, enjoyed the same diplomatic rank and precedence as ambassadors of foreign heads of state, and in some countries are accorded privileges not enjoyed by foreign ambassadors. For example, the British sovereign receives high commissioners before ambassadors, and sends a coach and 4 horses to fetch new high commissioners to the palace, whereas new ambassadors get only 2 horses. High Commissioners also attend important ceremonies of state, such as the annual Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph in Whitehall, commemorating Commonwealth war dead, and royal weddings and funerals. Thank you for watching this part of the video.